In a land of turmoil and history, Israel has always held a special place, not only for the Jewish people, but also for the world. It is a place where divine secrets converge, where many prophecies, lessons from God have been recorded over the centuries, illuminating a sacred connection between heaven and earth. It is in this land that God has given humanity invaluable lessons of love, forgiveness, and restoration. Israel is not only the center of historical events, but also the place where God's promises are fulfilled, where secrets are kept hidden, waiting for the time to be revealed. In every corner, every hill, every river, we can find the imprint of divine teachings, lessons of patience, resurrection, and God's boundless love for humanity. That secret invites us to return, to find the salvation and peace that only God can give. Number 1. The Great Promise and God's Divine Plan. The promise of a great land for Abraham's descendants was announced by God long ago. In the Bible, this covenant is not only a territorial designation, but also a sacred symbol of the intimate relationship between God and His people. When God said to Abraham, "To your descendants I give this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river the Euphrates," this statement is recorded in Genesis 15:18 as an eternal covenant. This covenant is not simply a historical promise, but a symbol of God's sovereign will and faithfulness. Similarly, in Exodus, God emphasizes the boundaries, from the Red Sea to the Euphrates, from the desert to the Philistine Sea. These words seem to inculcate in the hearts of the Israelites the belief that they belong to a greater plan, which transcends all human boundaries. Understand, the promised land included vast boundaries, stretching from the Red Sea westward, through the highlands to the Euphrates River in the east. To the south, the promise may refer to the river of Egypt, although some scholars believe this may refer to a dry river in the Sinai region. To the north, the territory covered may have reached Lebanon. These boundaries were not only geographical, but also symbolic of God's assurance that His plan for His people would endure. The covenant with Abraham was not limited to defining territory. It was also the promise of numerous descendants, of a great and mighty nation. Abraham was told by God that through him, all the nations of the earth would be blessed. This promise was not just for Israel, but for the whole world, a prophecy of Jesus, who would bless all nations. Furthermore, God says that nations will receive blessings or judgment based on how they treat Abraham's descendants. This is a reminder that righteousness and godly fear are not reserved for His people alone, but are the standard by which all nations are judged. Throughout its history, Israel never actually reached the whole boundaries that God promised. Under the reigns of David and Solomon, Israel's territory expanded considerably, but it still did not encompass the entire land described in the Bible. Areas such as those east of the Euphrates River were often vassal or confederated rather than under direct control. Today, the idea of Greater Israel is often interpreted differently. For some Jewish religious groups, it is a divine promise that will be fulfilled when the Messiah comes. Some view it through a political lens, although the concept has never been accepted as official policy. But above all, many scholars and believers believe Greater Israel's true meaning lies in a specific territory. In fact, the idea of Greater Israel is often controversial, especially in the modern context, when the area includes the territories of many countries, such as Israel, Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Egypt. The geopolitical complexities make many skeptical about whether such a border can ever become a reality. However, for those who believe in the Bible, Greater Israel symbolizes a time when God will complete His plan. When the Messiah returns, a kingdom of peace and justice will be established. According to Isaiah, the nations will come to worship God in Jerusalem, and people will live in the peace that only God can bring. The promise of this great land is not just about the restoration of a people, but also about the reconciliation of God and humanity. As we look to the future, we see that this promise is not an old promise, but a foundation of hope. God is faithful, and what He says He will do. As we reflect on this promise, we are reminded that God sees not only the present, but also all of eternity. The promised land is a picture of a greater kingdom, a place where there is no more war, suffering, or division. It is an invitation for each of us to put our trust in God, to wait in hope, and to live in obedience to Him. Despite the strife and turmoil in our world today, let us remember that God is still at work. He is preparing everything to fulfill His promises. For those who trust Him, we know that the end of the story lies not in human hands, but in His power and grace. The promise to Abraham is a reminder that God is faithful. He never forgets the words He has spoken. And as we contemplate the promised land, let our hearts be filled with hope and gratitude, because God is also preparing a place for all who believe in Him. It is not just a land, but an eternity, a place where we will live in His glorious presence forever. Number 2, the promised kingdom, Israel and the divine borders. The Bible describes the promise of Israel's borders with a hopeful vision. From the river of Egypt to the river Euphrates, it was a vast land, including the territory of present-day Israel and extending into areas of Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq. But was this promise fully fulfilled? This is a question that has caused much debate and contemplation throughout history. The time of King David was a remarkable milestone. He conquered many surrounding countries, from Moab, Edom, Ammon, to the northern regions of Aram, equivalent to modern-day Syria. David established political control and demanded tribute from vassal states. However, the territory under his reign did not completely encompass the promised land. Although he was a powerful king who was called a man after God's own heart, the kingdom his reign only partially achieved this divine vision. The reign of King Solomon, son of David, was considered the height of Israel's wealth and power. The Bible records that he ruled over a vast area, from the river to the land of the Philistines and the border of Egypt. However, this control was based primarily on political and economic domination through vassal states. It was a glorious but limited reign. Israel's population was not large enough to settle the entire promised land, and regional powers such as Egypt, Assyria, and Babylon frequently intervened, undermining Israel's power. Although the reign of David and Solomon was the territorial peak of Israel's history, the promise of divine boundaries was not entirely fulfilled. Why was this so? Partly because of human limitations. Neither population nor loyalty to God was sufficient to maintain stability. Biblical history shows that the kingdom was divided after Solomon, leading to a decline in power and territory. But this promise is not just a past one. Many scholars and theologians believe that it has a prophetic meaning, promising a future fulfillment. Some cite prophecies such as those in the book of Ezekiel, which describe the borders of Israel during the millennial kingdom. This is the time when the Messiah will rule, bringing complete peace and restoration. There are different views on how this promise will be fulfilled. Some see it as a literal territorial promise where Israel will possess the entire land assigned by God. Others view the promise through a symbolic lens, where the borders are not just land, but the fullness of the covenant between God and His people, fulfilled through Christ. In both interpretations, this promise emphasizes God's faithfulness and eternal plan for Israel and all mankind. Technical, geographical, and historical factors also need to be considered. The Egyptian river, commonly understood as the Wadi el-Arish in the eastern Sinai Peninsula, is sometimes argued to be the eastern branch of the Nile. The Euphrates, one of the region's largest rivers, runs through Turkey, Syria, and Iraq. During the reigns of David and Solomon, Israel only had temporary control over some areas along this river. Geographical and power struggles between major empires such as Egypt, Assyria, and Babylon have made the Promised Land a place of conflict throughout history. The promise of sacred borders is not only historical, but also profoundly relevant to the present. Many groups, from Judaism to Christianity, look to this promise as a guarantee of Israel's future. With the re-establishment of modern Israel in 1948, the prophecy of restoration seems to have begun to be realized. But the sacred border remains an unfulfilled promise. Israel's journey is a testament to God's faithfulness. Through each age, God has continually reminded His people that His promises have never changed. In the modern context, where instability and conflict still plague the Middle East, this promise highlights Israel's role in God's global plan of redemption. As we look to the future, it is important to look beyond the territory and recognize the deeper meaning of this promise. It reminds us that God is faithful, always doing what He says. In every step of history, through victory and defeat, Israel is a living testimony to His covenant. We must also remember that God's promises are not just for one nation, but open up hope for all humanity. Through Christ, we are all invited to be part of this spiritual kingdom. So put your trust in God, live by His word, and look forward to the day when all the promises will be fully fulfilled. Number 3. Israel in the light of prophecy, the promised land, and the divine mission. Israel, a land deeply connected to God's promise and revelation, is not only a territory with a long history, but also has a special significance in the divine plan. From the Golan Heights to the West Bank, each region reflects a part of the great story of the chosen people and the prophecies that have been promised since ancient times. The Golan Heights, a highland located northeast of Israel, symbolizes protection and survival. With its special terrain, this place is a natural fortress and an essential location for monitoring and preventing threats from neighboring countries. The average altitude of about 1,000 meters above sea level allows Israel to monitor all military movements from Syria and Lebanon. This is not only strategic but also a manifestation of preparedness, something the Bible repeatedly reminds us. Watch, watchful and alert, for God always calls His people to live in prudence. Not only does it act as a protective wall, the Golan Heights is also the source of many important rivers, providing fresh water to the Sea of Galilee. This is the key source of water that nourishes the land of Israel, bringing life to the people of God. In every drop of water that flows through, it seems to echo God's promise that He will always provide for and protect His people. The plateau also bears historical marks. When in 1967, after the Six-Day War, Israel took control of this place. This action not only has geopolitical significance, but also recalls the wars in the Bible, where God always stood on the side of His people, giving them victory in the midst of many challenges. The land of the West Bank, called Judea and Samaria in the Bible, is the historical and spiritual heart of the Jewish people. This is where Abraham followed God's call, where David was born, and where Samuel prayed. Every inch of this land, every stone, every path, tells the story of the covenant between God and the people of Israel. The promise of the promised land is not just a place name, but also a symbol of God's faithfulness and provision. Today, the West Bank is home to hundreds of thousands of Israelis. These settlements, while controversial in the international community, are a testament to the belief of many Jews that this land belongs to them, not only by history but also by promise from God. For Israel, the West Bank is not only strategic, straddling the valleys that connect the Jordan and the Mediterranean, but also holds a significant spiritual heritage and military presence. It is also the site of major disputes as Palestinians seek to build an independent state on this land. But amid the tensions, the light of God's word shines, reminding His people that everything is part of a divine plan and that He is still leading. For devout Jews, the West Bank and the Golan Heights are integral parts of the vision of Greater Israel. In the Bible, the territory promised by God stretches from the Nile to the Euphrates. This promise is not just a provision of land, but also a symbol of the solidity of the covenant between God and His people. Those who keep their faith in God will see that every step of Israel's history, despite its difficulties and conflicts, has been directed toward fulfilling this divine promise. But more than territorial or strategic interests, the Golan Heights and the West Bank have a deeper spiritual significance. They are not just pieces of land on a map, but a testament to God's presence and power in history. Through every war, every conflict, Israel stands as a living testimony to God's faithfulness. He has promised, and He will fulfill. In the modern world, the geopolitical turmoil surrounding Israel is not surprising. The Bible foretold the trials that the nation would face before the prophecy was fully fulfilled, but it also serves as a reminder to each of us. God is still working out His plan, not just for Israel, but for all of humanity. What happens in the Golan, the West Bank, or elsewhere is a call to watch, pray, and be ready for the Lord's return. The story of Israel is an integral part of God's plan of redemption. Every place, from the Golan to the West Bank, conveys God's faithfulness, protection, and unfailing love. As we look at the events unfolding in this land, let us remember that they are not just political events, but also reminders of God's grand plan for humanity. For believers, this is a time to strengthen their faith, to see God's hand in all that is happening, and to prepare for the day when all prophecies will be fulfilled. Israel is a symbol of hope and promise, not only for the Jewish people but for all who put their trust in God. Through history and the present, we see a clear message: God is faithful to His covenant. No matter how the world changes or conflicts continue, God's plan never changes. We just need to put our trust in Him and continue to live in obedience and hope, because God will fulfill all that He has promised. Number 4. The U.S.-Eurasian relationship, prophecy and global destiny. Throughout history, the relationship between the United States and Israel has been more than just a political or military alliance. It has also fulfilled biblical prophecies. When Israel declared its independence in 1948, the United States was one of the first countries to recognize the State of Israel, a move that ushered in an era of close cooperation, not only for strategic reasons, but also for deeply held beliefs. From the beginning, U.S. military and economic support for Israel has helped the country rise to prominence in the Middle East. Since the 1960s, the United States has been Israel's largest source of military aid, assisting Israel maintain its technological edge in the region. As of 2023, the United States has provided Israel with more than $150 billion in aid, including advanced missile defense systems like Iron Dome. This not only demonstrates the United States' commitment to Israel's security, but also affirms its role in maintaining regional stability. In addition, the United States has played an essential role in defending Israel on the international stage, using its influence in the United Nations to block resolutions condemning Israel has helped protect the country from criticism from many Arab countries and the international community. However, one of the most important milestones in U.S.-Israeli relations was the recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital in 2017. This decision was not only political in nature, but also had profound theological significance for millions of Christians around the world, as it was seen as a fulfillment of biblical prophecy. According to Zechariah chapter 12 verses 3, Jerusalem will become a heavy stone for all nations in the last days. When President Donald Trump recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, many believed it marked a step forward in God's plan for Israel and the world. For conservative Christian communities, it was a powerful sign of God's favor toward the people of Israel, opening up hope for a time of restoration and justice in the last days. Israel's relations with other countries have profound implications for the geopolitical picture, not just the support from the United States. Relations with Iran and Arab states are major challenges for Israel. Iran, with its nuclear ambitions and support for militant groups like Hezbollah, continues to pose a major threat to Israel's security. Iran's growing influence in Syria, where it supports President Bashar al-Assad, has further increased tensions between Israel and rival forces in the region. But simultaneously, the rise of other powers such as China and Russia also creates significant changes in the world order. The BRICS alliance, which includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, is gradually creating a new force in global politics and economics. While Israel maintains good relations with some BRICS countries, the relationship between Israel and Russia is more complicated. Russia, under the leadership of President Vladimir Putin, has developed close ties with countries such as Iran and Syria, directly opposing Israeli interests in the Middle East. China's growing influence in the Middle East is no less critical. China has increased investment in infrastructure projects and trade relations with many countries in the region, including Israel. However, China's alignment with Iran and its involvement in initiatives such as the Belt and Road Initiative could pose challenges to the U.S.-Israeli relationship in the future. Against this backdrop, Israel is trying to maintain a flexible response strategy, expanding its diplomatic and economic ties with countries in Asia, Africa, and the Gulf. Agreements such as the Abraham Accords, which Israel signed with the United Arab Emirates, UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco, are essential to diversifying Israel's international relationships. But amid all this turmoil, one thing is certain. The U.S.-Israel relationship will continue to be a central factor in the stability of the Middle East. The strategic decisions of major powers, especially the United States, will continue to have a profound impact on the future of Israel and the region. However, with biblical prophecy as a guiding light, this relationship is not based solely on political calculations, but is also enveloped in God's divine plan. With faith in God's guidance, Israel and the nations that support it will overcome the current challenges and prepare for a future filled with hope and justice. We are reminded that in the last days, only steadfast faith and God's love can help us overcome all difficulties, restoring Israel and the world. End footnote. Number 5. The Final War, Prophecy and Hope in the End Times. In the Bible, prophecies are not only warnings, but also a light to guide future generations. In particular, the prophecies in Ezekiel, Daniel, and Revelation open a picture of events that will occur in the last days of world history. These descriptions not only influence faith, but also reflect geopolitical upheavals that may occur in the modern world. In the book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39, a great war is prophesied, called the War of Gog and Magog. This is a war between a coalition of nations against Israel in the end times. Gog is the leader of this coalition, and Magog is said to be a nation or group of nations involved in the conflict. These nations, such as Persia, now Iran, Gomer, Meshech, and Tubal, may be present-day nations or regions who form an alliance against Israel in the future. Iran, known as Persia in the Bible, has always been a major rival of Israel. Political tensions between the two nations have been going on for decades, and according to the prophecy in Ezekiel, Iran will be part of an alliance against Israel in the end times. Other nations in the region, such as Russia and some Eastern European countries, could join this alliance, increasing the risk of a large-scale conflict. The picture of this war is not just about attack, but also God's intervention. No matter how strong the alliance of these nations is, the result is still their defeat. In Ezekiel 39, God will protect Israel and punish his enemies. It is a promise of salvation and restoration for the people of Israel in the last days. Moving on to the book of Daniel, we see another prophetic picture of the great empires that will play an essential role in the end times. In chapters 2, 7, and 11 of Daniel, the prophecy of the great empires that will rule in different periods of history: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. Each of these empires reflects the changing global power and influence over the ages, and Daniel also mentions the conflicts between these empires, especially the involvement of Persia in essential battles. Persia, or Iran, is not only a powerful nation in the past, but also appears repeatedly in Daniel's prophecies. In chapter 11, we see the conflict between Persia and other empires, and this is closely linked to the future end times, as described in the book of Ezekiel. The connection between these nations and end times events is always clear in Bible prophecy. Revelation, especially chapters 16 and 20, also provides images of the final battle between good and evil. One of the greatest battles in Revelation is the Battle of Armageddon, where the nations and forces that oppose God will confront the power of God. Like the Battle of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel, Armageddon is also a war between alliances of nations against Israel and ends in God's victory. The current geopolitical landscape suggests that the prophecies in Ezekiel, Daniel, and Revelation are not just distant stories, but may reflect events that are taking place in the modern world. Alliances between Iran and other nations, tensions between Israel and its neighbors, and conflicts in the Middle East may all be important factors in laying the groundwork for future prophetic events. Countries like Iran, Russia, and some Muslim nations will likely join together to form alliances to fight against Israel, just as the Bible describes. These prophecies are not empty warnings, but invitations to believers to prepare for what is coming. We are called to live in fidelity to God, to persevere in our faith, and to be ready for great trials. No matter how the world changes, our hope is in God's promise that He will ultimately triumph and Israel will be restored. So the prophecies of the Bible are not only a part of history, but also an encouragement to us in these difficult times. Ezekiel, Daniel, and Revelation all remind us that God has a perfect plan for the future, and everything will come to pass just as He said. The alliances between nations, the wars, and the interventions of God will shed more light on His power and the restoration of Israel, bringing hope to all who believe in Him. With strong faith, we can face every challenge, believing that God will always be there and lead us to final victory. Number 6. The road to peace, the meaning and importance of the Abraham Accords. In 2020, a significant event occurred in the history of international relations in the Middle East. The Abraham Accords, a U.S. brokered peace agreement, opened a new chapter in relations between Israel and several Arab countries. The agreement not only marked the normalization of relations between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, UAE, and Bahrain, but also reflected profound political and economic changes in the region. The importance of the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords resulted from lengthy negotiations, with a commitment to establish diplomatic relations between Israel and the participating Arab countries. Specifically, the UAE and Bahrain agreed to open diplomatic channels, exchange ambassadors, and establish economic, security, and technological ties. This cooperation not only benefits the participating countries, but also opens up opportunities for building a lasting peace in the Middle East. Arab states have seen normalization of relations with Israel as a key opportunity to boost their economies amid the oil crisis and global competition. It has also opened up opportunities for technological and military cooperation, especially amid rising tensions with Iran and militant groups in the region. The Accords and their impact on the Middle East. The Abraham Accords were not simply a step toward peace, but had far-reaching implications for the region's political landscape. Relations had previously been dominated by hostility and conflict, but now, with the UAE and Bahrain joining, new doors have been opened. Cooperation in areas such as security, counterterrorism, and high technology has brought countries in the region closer together, creating a more stable environment. However, this change has not been without its challenges. Despite the marked progress in relations between Israel and the Arab states, the Palestinian issue remains a major sticking point. The Palestinian government and many Arab groups believe that any peace process with Israel must be based on the principle of recognizing the Palestinian people's right to self-determination and a two-state solution. Failure to resolve this issue could lead to pressure from regional factions, as well as discontent from other Arab states. Changing political and social structures. The Abraham Accords also reflect a shift in the political and social values of Arab states. Previously, most of these states had taken a hard line on Israel and sided with the Palestinians in the long-standing conflict. However, in the current context, political and economic changes have led some Arab states to adjust their foreign policy strategies. This could have major implications for the region's future, with the promotion of peace and the risk of unexpected upheaval. Iran's influence and regional stability. Iran is always an essential factor in any analysis of Middle East politics. Given the long-standing hostility between Israel and Iran, the Abraham Accords have further increased tensions between these countries. Iran may feel threatened by the new cooperation between Israel and Arab states, especially as these states also have concerns about Iran's influence in the region. However, the Abraham Accords are still an important milestone in achieving regional peace, despite the concerns and uncertainties. Stability may not come immediately, but the first steps in building peaceful relations between Israel and Arab states will contribute to a more stable future for the Middle East. The future and challenges ahead. While the Abraham Accords have created new opportunities and opened avenues for cooperation between Israel and the Arab states, questions remain about the agreement's sustainability. The consensus among these states may be tested by external factors, including the influence of Western powers, changes in Arab state leadership, and unresolved issues in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The sustainability of the Abraham Accords will depend on the ability to resolve outstanding issues, especially the development of a just solution to the Palestinian issue. If the Arab states and Israel can reach a reasonable and fair agreement for all parties, the path to regional peace can continue to move forward vigorously. Conversely, if the issues are not resolved, the situation may become more complicated, with unpredictable implications for all countries involved. Number 7. New alliances and the last prophets. In a rapidly changing world, the strong alliance between countries such as Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa in the BRICS bloc is attracting global attention. The recent entry of Iran and Egypt into the bloc has further increased the importance of BRICS in the modern geopolitical context. However, this development may not be simply an economic or political change. It may also be linked to biblical prophecies about the nations that will rise against Israel in the last days. The BRICS bloc initially consisted of only 4 countries: Brazil, Russia, India, and China. But over time, the alliance has expanded to include South Africa. Recently, countries like Iran and Egypt have also expressed their desire to join the bloc. The main goal of BRICS is to counter the influence of Western powers, especially the United States and the European Union. However, these goals are not limited to the economic and trade spheres, but extend to politics and the military. Among the BRICS countries, Iran and Egypt stand out in particular. Iran, with its strategic location in the Middle East, has become a strong opponent of Israel. It has close ties with militant groups such as Hezbollah and Hamas, and has repeatedly stated its opposition to Israel's presence in the region. Similarly, although Egypt has had a peace treaty with Israel since 1979, in the current political climate, this relationship is likely to be volatile, especially as Egypt joins BRICS and develops relations with anti-Israel states. The rise of BRICS influence, and especially the involvement of Iran and Egypt, is no coincidence. Many Bible scholars and researchers believe that this could be a foreshadowing of the Old Testament prophecies, specifically Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39, which speak of a coalition of nations that will rise against Israel in the last days. These nations, including Persia, now Iran, will be the main opponents in the final war. Biblical prophecy describes a coalition of nations from the east and the north that will attack Israel in the end times. This coalition will include nations such as Gog and Magog, and some neighboring nations including Persia, Iran, Ethiopia, and Libya. This combination can be seen as a reflection of the political and military connections between the BRICS nations, where Iran and Egypt play a major role. This suggests a strong and hostile alliance with Israel, which is consistent with prophecies of confrontation between Israel and the nations in the end times. The disk groups in the 11th, by contrast, seem to be closer to Almighty, since they seem solely the disciples of Egypt. The ongoing global power shift, with the rise of the BRICS and the growing influence of anti-Israel nations such as Iran and Egypt, could pose a major threat to Israel. Israel could then face an isolated situation with these nations standing together in a strong alliance against Israel. However, in this scenario, Israel must rely on the divine promises it believes in. That no weapon formed against it shall prosper will be Israel's ultimate defense in times of trouble. Looking at the big picture, the shift in global power, especially with the rise of BRICS and powerful nations like Iran and Egypt, may present Israel with significant challenges. However, through these challenges, faith in God's divine promises will be the ultimate salvation, protecting the people of Israel in the final days of human history. Israel's restoration in this period will not only be the result of national effort, but also direct protection from God. The final confrontation between these nations is not just a battle of power, but also a battle of faith, where Israel will need God's help to overcome these challenges. The prophecies in the Bible are not only warnings of what is to come in the future, but also reminders of God's divine protection for His people. And in the end, Israel's victory will not come from military might, but from faithfulness to God's promises, His invisible protection in the most difficult times. Throughout history, Israel has been not just a small land, but also the center of great mysteries, where God's prophecies were written and fulfilled. God has placed Israel as a sign, not only for the nations, but also for each of us, a lesson in His restoration, His love, and His infinite power. The greatest mystery that Israel brings us is the presence of God in every step of history. Through the teachings and events in the Bible, it is a message of forgiveness, God's protection for those who turn to Him, and a call for each of us to live with faith, with patience in all trials. Every prophecy, every event that happened in the land of Israel contains valuable lessons about faith and obedience. Just as Israel went through ups and downs, we cannot avoid difficulties in life. However, the lesson from Israel is that no matter how difficult the situation is, if we always trust in God, He will guide and protect us. Learn from these secrets to understand that God is always there, in every moment, ready to help and lead us to salvation. If you want to learn more about profound lessons from the Bible and the secrets of God, don't forget to follow and subscribe to our channel to receive more inspirational videos and sharing about the journey of finding truth and salvation in life.